Okay, so this is something that another idea I've been kicking around in my head for a while. Going to go ahead and give it a try. I'm pretty sure it's something I'm going to continue doing, but I know I might have some wrinkles to iron out. So this is going to be a wide open, wide-ranging, purely opinion driven video. This is going to be my opportunity to weigh in on a lot of different topics. I'm going to talk about my own opinions with regard to war games, more or less games. Weigh in on which is more important, realism or fun. Weigh in on how seriously war games should be taken by those outside the hobby, i.e. the military, the government, whatever. So this is wide open, pure commentary, and instead of just talking rather haphazardly, I'm going to always use one or more kind of anchor, an anchor. Something to anchor the monologue is what it is. I know, straight monologue. In this case, this is an entire thread that I read recently, very recently. So just to a little bit of setting. This is the miniatures page. This is, I think, in the general section, and under the message board section, and under the game design section, and then the topic or thread here is titled "Improving Game Design." So here is the original post, and I'm going to jump right in. So Editor-in-Chief Bill posts here, writing on the game design forum at TMP, The Hawk said, all right, the best hope for improving games design is to improve the knowledge of systems modeling and design techniques amongst the games design community. I'm not saying that they need to design games using professional techniques, but just become more aware of the way warfare works as a system. There is space for hard, mathematical, and soft, non-mathematical mechanisms in the same game. It's not a one or the other choice. Kriegspiel used soft techniques over 100 years ago in the form of umpires using seat-of-the-pants methods to assess situations. One benefit is the uncertainty that a soft model produces in the mind of the player. The player can't assess the odds, but just responds to inputs from the umpire. The Perfect Captain's WOTR, game design, immerses the player in an historical environment via its use of historical terminology and concepts. This is another soft, non-mathematical technique. I don't play many commercial products, but if anything, I think wargaming is moving more towards toy gaming than an adult hobby. It should be going the other way. For example, by looking at warfare using modern design techniques. Do you agree or disagree? So, from just this cut out passage that we can go ahead and assume is coming from some larger context, right? The thesis, I guess, from this passage anyways, is that game designers, or I should say game design, should be moving away from wargaming as playing with toys towards something else, and that something else should be guided by what the author thinks of as modern design techniques, which the author of this post seems to assume is related to an understanding of warfare as a system. Okay. Now let's see what let's go through with the responses. Okay, yes, that Phil writes, that's a pretty generalized series of points, but I presume it is the last paragraph you were particularly looking at. Okay, we already talked about that. So yes, some trends within the more commercial game sector are moving towards the toy game, perhaps, but there's probably more looking at warfare using modern design techniques than ever before in the historical, innovative, WD, and related sector. As usual, it very much depends on who you wargame with, which events you attend, and which publications you read. Okay. All right. Gildas Facet. All right. So the real problem with that approach are the real problems with that approach are the complexity of the model that you would be likely to produce, and for earlier eras, the need to use imperfect rules assumed from limited information. I'm not sure that wargaming is, quote, moving more towards toy gaming than an adult hobby, but it is definitely broadening out into areas that would, in the past, not really have been thought of as wargaming per se. That's an interesting idea that I don't think I understand what he's pointing to. I do wonder what he means by broadening out into areas that earlier would not have been thought of as wargaming per se. Or maybe he's talking about, I don't know, because I thought we had fantasy wargaming going back quite a ways too. Sci-fi, I'm not sure but it's interesting, but I'm not sure what he's referring to. For me, there has to be an historical anchor to whatever I'm playing. I'm happy to shift and modify the actual history. Okay, emphasis sometimes on story, for example, VBCW, but not cut the anchor chain. Okay, the wider spread of skirmish gaming, defined to me as one figure represents one warrior into fictional arenas beyond the traditional fantasy and hard sci-fi, is very noticeable, even though it has no interest for me. So maybe this is what he's referring to earlier about this broadening out. Is he talking about Warhammer 40K and all these types of, and there are many, many more in of that type? Probably, I guess so. Okay, and there is this, idea anyways. Is there, has skirmish gaming been spreading particularly more recently than in the past? I wonder. Okay, this question, W. Minsing. I guess you need to explain toy gaming versus adult hobby to me before I could pass judgment. This is an interesting idea, a perfectly valid point, but honestly, my response is I don't think there's much more to it than toy gaming and adult hobby. So playing with toys in a gaming setting or context versus an adult hobby, a hobby that generally takes adult faculties. I don't think that this should be overthought. This is going to come up this is going to recur here, so we'll continue to develop that question or think about that question. Toy gaming, well, they are toy soldiers. This is I'm trying to remember if this theme recurs as well. This is a wasted idea. Toy gaming, well, they are toy soldiers. Just because they're toy soldiers doesn't mean it's automatically toy gaming. I don't know. It's a wasted input. I suspect the core. Okay, I'm sorry. I should pay attention to who's posting here. So, McKinstry. I suspect the core issue not being identified except obliquely is the game versus simulation. So here is where I think the setting of the discussion is going to start to expand here. So the game versus simulation, fun trumps detail, historical accuracy in quotes, sacrifice for simplicity and speed that we periodically debate. Okay. So instantly we're bringing in several, not only, well-worn, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but well-worn debates. And we're also bringing these in kind of fell swoop And by what I mean by that is McKinstry doesn't offer anything on these discussions. He's going to bring them in, and I think we're going to start to see this again. All right, Sharp 52. If you look at the old rules such as Donald Featherstone's ones, you notice that there was a lot of historical research, but the mechanism of rules were quite simple. In my opinion, commercial rules are going where customers ask. That is, simple rules, easy to play, fast enough for an evening game, and above all, fun. So already, and I suspect I'll be coming back to this, above all, fun. I agree with the general idea of Featherstone and others of that generation appearing to have a lot of historical research in backup, but mechanisms actually rather straightforward. I don't know about simple, but quite straightforward mechanisms. I got that. Well, let's go on. This is going to keep coming up. P.J. O'Neill. I agree with the original poster, but I think a major influence on the more streamlined, abstract, and simple rules of today is a reaction against the detailed, maybe more accurate, but definitely tedious rules of the 70s and 80s. This is a recurring theme that I know I'm going to want to comment on. I'm not going to rush it here. But there is this recurring theme that apparently, I don't know from firsthand experience, but apparently in the 1970s and 80s, war game rule sets were exceedingly detailed, very complex in mechanics, and tedious. I say this because I've heard this so many times that I'm about ready to dig through my collection and deliberately search out what I can find or dig out what I believe to be the most representative, the most solidly 1970s/1980s rule set, and just throw together some units, maybe even just cardboard pieces, cut out, use a Sharpie marker to draw up units, and see if these rules are really how they're being portrayed. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I want to see what's meant by this, because coming into the hobby 5-6 years ago, basically coming into the hobby about 2010, very, very, very recently, all I'm hearing about is how, and it's going to come up here later in the discussion here, all I'm being told is that rules today are so much better than the past, and they're so much better because they are streamlined, more abstract, and more simple. This is a very interesting idea. I'm presenting it this way for only one reason, and that is I don't think that this is the end of the discussion at all. Where is the end of the discussion? I don't know. I think it's an ongoing discussion, but I don't think that's the end of the discussion. And again, I think that's gonna come up again here very, very shortly. Buckeye Bob. Okay. So I don't play many commercial products. He's quoting the original poster, which again, if you remember, is the quoted passage. Okay. Then how do you know what the commercial rule sets are moving towards? So this is interesting. I don't even bother with responding to opinions like his when he has no basis for saying what he does. Now, first of all, to Buckeye Bob here, you don't give me any idea that you actually went back and read the entire context from where this passage was taken from. Now, I'm going to go ahead and assume that you did. I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt here, assume that you did read the entire piece to get the entire context. But the idea that somebody can't write something up about the course of game design when they don't play many commercial products is simply not, well, I can't say anything more than for some people this is a very strong argument. I know for other people's it's not really a strong argument at all. Just because you don't play many commercial products doesn't mean you can't spend a lot of time observing commercial products being played. I mean, I imagine if somebody, of course I'm speaking hypothetically here, but if a person did nothing but spend all their time monitoring gaming conventions and watched hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of games of miniatures being played with all these different rule sets, this person could I'm imagining, be way more knowledgeable and have much better formulated opinions about wargaming than I have, because I haven't ever spent the time observing all these different war games being played, at convention after convention after convention. So I don't know. It just doesn't. The suggestion that the original poster has no basis for offering some perspective just doesn't have any weight. All right, e to the IP, whatever. Well, I'll make up my own. E to the IP, using system design principles does not necessarily lead to a game with more details. True. Games with lots of details were not necessarily designed from a system's point of view. True, yes. Granted, yes. All a system's design and modeling approach requires is that when you tell the players to do something, you first look through how that interacts with everything else you have already told the players to do. Okay. I'm not sure a statement that begins with all a system's design and modeling approach requires is such and such is this suggests some type of generalization. I'll leave it at that for now because we're going to get into a lot more generalizations. As the quoted portion says, mathematical modeling techniques are not necessary for this approach. The more moving parts, mathematical or non-mathematical, you have in the game, the more mathematical modeling techniques will help you design the game. Okay. And here we go again. Until I know what an adult hobby is as opposed to toy gaming, I really can't comment on the rest. I'll tell you right now, everybody who's going to harp on this, you can just as easily input your own reasonable ideas of adult hobby and toy gaming and comment. I'm sure you can do that. So who asked this joker disagrees? Disagrees with that original idea, which remember we isolated as the original poster, which of course the original poster is not. When I say original poster, I'm always talking about the author of the quoted material, obviously. I say obviously because the actual original poster doesn't ask anything but agree or disagree. So who asked this joker is obviously disagreeing with the idea that war games are tending towards toy gaming and could benefit from certain kinds of design techniques. All right, so who has this joke? Disagrees. Great. Doug MSC. Some people like simple rules and some like a more intricate rule system. As my grandpa used to say, to each his own, as long as you enjoy the game. Got it? Okay, so basically we're going to put this in the category and we'll see how many votes we get for this. As long as you enjoy the game, why argue about different, I guess, approaches to enjoying the activity of wargaming? All right, who asked this joker comes back. I agree with Doug MSC. I'm in the hobby to play with toy soldiers using simple wargame rules. The strategy and tactics are far, far more important than actual modeling of warfare. Capture the salient points, yes. Grind it all down to casualty rates and realistic move sequence, no thanks. Okay, right here. this statement, the strategy and tactics are far, far more important than actual modeling of warfare. This, how many minutes in am I? Well, you can see how many minutes in I am. 20 minutes in. It's this type of statement that starts making me think, starts me to develop some pretty strong responses. Says this is how widespread this view is, I'm not sure. I want to pay closer attention than I have so far, but who asked this joker is not the only one to express this idea. I've heard this, the way I would put this general idea in, the way I would put this general idea is the sentiment, which is widespread. I don't know how widespread, but the sentiment is, I don't want to be concerned with a lot of details. I don't want to be required to follow a bunch of detailed procedures because I want to focus on strategy and tactics. I find this an incredibly curious idea. So the strategy and tactics are far, far more important than actual modeling of warfare. Now, of course, this implies that strategy and tactics can somehow be separated from the quote-unquote actual modeling of warfare. Not to mention the sentiment that that's more important. Is strategy and tactics far, far more important than the actual modeling of warfare? I ask that question, not rhetorically, because I can think of an incredibly important, I can think of all sorts of importance attached to getting the actual realistic modeling of warfare right, which doesn't directly have to do with strategy and tactics per se. But really, what I'm getting at is you're saying strategy and tactics are way more important than actual modeling of warfare, and yet how do you think you understand and how do you practice strategy and tactics if you don't understand the actual modeling of warfare? I guess in a related question, of course, can't really do much with this question at this specific moment in time, but if you're actively ignoring the actual modeling of warfare, what do you think you're focusing on when you think you're focusing on strategy and tactics? And I'll put it one more way. Tactics is based on, in a sense, you could say that the modeling of warfare is one of the foundations of tactics. So what happens when we put it another way, what happens when we forcefully try to separate what we believe to be strategy and tactics from the actual modeling of warfare? I wonder. I'm leaving this open-ended because this is a theme I'm going to be returning to. Yeah, I will. All right, McLaddy quotes, okay, I don't play many commercial products, so on and so forth, etc. I've always wondered about the wargaming hobby, if only because it seems to ignore or remain unaware of some of the basic organizing of most other hobbies. Okay, for instance, the RC airplane hobby includes those folks who buy an out-of-the-box plane and fly on the odd weekend, as well as those hardcore modelers who count and reproduce every rivet and dial on the instrument panel in their model P51. The one thing you don't see with RC modelers is a debate of where the hobby is going between these 2 points on the hobby continuum. Both are part of the same hobby and always have been. By the way, I want to interject. This is a great setting for a question. Why are, and maybe related, why should wargamers be concerned about where the hobby is going, where RC airplane hobbyists do not? I think games about warfare are different than models of airplanes, is what I'm getting at. We'll return to that. But still, it is an interesting observation that McLady's pointing out that that this full spectrum of hobbyists are basically all part of the same hobby and apparently see themselves as such. Okay, so where would you find most RC modelers, particularly when it's obvious where all RC enthusiasts will start in the hobby? I like this point, actually. I assume he's saying, hey, everyone started in the amateur beginner entry point, and only some wound up at the every rivet and dial place on the spectrum. There is an influx of new war gamers at the moment. It seems that way, yes. They want introductory games. And yes, that does appear to be the gist, yes, of our situation today. All the experienced gamers see many of the simple games as childish compared to what they play. Yeah, granted. Often war gamers themselves don't help. This isn't a very interesting story. Well, it's interesting. It's something to consider. He relates, I saw one old wargamer at a convention speak to a teenager who had been involved in a Warhammer game with, gasp, unpainted figures. The old wargamer's table was gorgeous, terrain and figures superb. He said to the teenager, "Why don't you come over and play a real war game?" That was probably a mistake. The teenager left and didn't return. I can imagine he was overwhelmed thinking of trying to collect and paint and lay out the real war game. Hobbies have obvious introduction points of entry into the hobby that ours doesn't. It makes it relatively inaccessible in comparison. We need those simple games. This is I won't comment one way or the other, but this is probably something that a lot of wargamers can agree on. Those wargamers enamored of Blucher now may stay with such simple wargames for the rest of their hobby tenure. Others won't, but move on to deeper wargaming experiences. Both are part of the same hobby, and the groups playing the simpler games will always outnumber the grognards. That's the way it is in every hobby. Yes, okay. Now I would say, thanks to McLady here, we are kind of filling out our discussion, and it's getting more. The discussion is definitely filling out, in important ways. Tony S. writes, "Don't forget that simple does not necessarily mean simplistic." This is interesting because this is something I've been thinking of recently. Simple, simplified versus simplistic. Okay, very, very interesting. Blucher is indeed simple, yet I would argue is much deeper than any other rule set that purports to be of the same level. Depends on how you define deeper. If deeper is pages and pages of rules attempting to simulate warfare, then it is not. If deeper makes you feel like you are commanding a multi-corps Napoleonic army, then yes, it is deeper. Interesting idea. Not sure I agree with that. Chain of command is simple, yet real-world tactics are rewarded. Bolt action is simple, yet it is toy soldiers. Fun, yes, but really does not give anyone an idea about World War II tactical platoon warfare. I think, if nothing else, I'll interject at this point, if nothing else, if this, and this is a concept that recurs over and over in the discussions I'm following, which kind of gave impetus to this video in the first place. This idea of this assumption that so many wargamers are pursuing a deeper understanding of World War II tactical platoon warfare. If anything, we should focus on that question and really figure out what we mean and what we're getting at there. I think that'll be coming back up. The designer of Chain of Command has stated that he quite deliberately kept the rules simple so as not to get in the way of tactics. See, here it is again. This, I believe, is related to the comments before about rules getting in the way. Here it's the rules getting in the way of tactics, whereas before it was details or rules getting in the way of the player being able to focus on strategy and tactics. By the way, let me just interject at this point. I'm going to be returning to this point because I want to frame this point in a particular way. I recognize full well that it is a great selling point to have on the back of a box or on the back of a rules book the statement, our rules are streamlined, they're simple, they're intuitive, so that you can focus on tactics and strategy. I got it, that's a compelling, selling blurb. But the selling blurb, statements that make good selling blurbs are sometimes, even in and of themselves, meaningless. Sometimes they're even contradictory. Sometimes, if you think of all the selling blurbs that make up, the commercials you see and hear through the day, whether it's online, television, radio, a lot of selling points statements they sound great, they connect with you, that's what they're supposed to do. You break them down and they're actually nonsensical. So that's kind of what I'm going to be getting at here. But again, we have this idea. So the designer of Chain of Command has stated that he quite deliberately kept the rules simple so as not to get in the way of tactics. The assumption, of course, here is that if your rules aren't simple, you're going to be getting in the way of tactics. A very interesting idea. Not sure I agree. That philosophy to me is a mark of a deeper game. Now, this is very interesting when this poster believes that right there, which I can't even agree with, this idea of rules and the relationship of rules to tactics and strategy, that approach is the mark of a deeper game. Wow. But damn, it is indeed hard to write a simple set of rules to accurately reflect a period. Now here, I completely agree with this sentiment, and I will give this sentiment 100% to the poster here. Garth in the Park comes back. In my opinion, commercial rules are going where customers... Okay, so this is, again, the earlier post about rules are going where customers are basically paying their money. Customers are paying for simple, easy to play, fast, and fun rules, and that's where commercial rules are going. And so Garth in the Park responds, definitely, it is a free marketplace after all. The people speak with their wallets. I'll just say this, this is self-evidently true, okay? Self-evidently true, and yet it's never the full picture. You never have a perfect marketplace, ever. And so the only thing I ask is, yes, this is self-evidently true. However, what else is not being, brought into the aperture here beyond this so-called free marketplace? So those wargamers enamored of Blucher now may stay with such simple wargames. Again, earlier quote, Garth responds, my copy is about 180 pages long. Did you buy the simple version? Of course. I'm assuming he's trying to be cute here. Again, the assumption is that a rule book of 180 pages cannot be simple. Very interesting. I immediately thought, I'm 2 arms lengths away from me is sitting the Black Powder rulebook, which has many pages and has incredibly simple rules. So, anybody who thinks that a game of that length is simple is probably not in a good position to wax philosophical about trends in the hobby. I respect Garth's opinion here, simply don't agree. Now we go back to the toy gaming versus adult hobby. And Garth says, indeed, if bass fishing is an adult hobby, but tabletop gaming isn't, then I'd like to know why. Not even an interesting question, in my opinion. It's crazy to hear people in a small, aging hobby like tabletop historical games coming up with reasons to make it even smaller and more exclusive by moving away from the very people we should be trying to recruit, new, young people. I want to talk about this. I'm going to take my first stab at this. I may have to revisit this. I'm sure I'll have to revisit it because I'm sure my first stab at this is going to be far from on target. Let me just say, and this is not in any way this isn't meant to be a direct counter to this idea. The idea I'm talking about is the assumption here is the hobby should be making every effort to recruit new and young people, and that involves and that means moving toward these new younger potential gamers, which I guess means catering to what we think they want, or even what they say they want. I'm not trying to counter this directly. I want to start with something. So I only entered this hobby like full time, a few years ago in 2010. I first encountered war games many, many years ago when I was about, I was 11 or 12, something like that. I was introduced to a good handful of games within a short period. I remember one was, I think, Caesar at Elysia. One was the old bookcase game Luftwaffe. Another one was the D-Day game. I'm assuming it was the Avalon Hill flat box D-Day game. And a couple of others at that. I think it was Advanced Third Reich. So I was introduced to these games, and even without being led too much, I believe. Now, I'm sure I was led by comments of others around me. I'm sure I was led by things said in the rules, things said on the game boxes. Okay, but I consider that minor compared to how much information we have available to us immediately these days. But way back then, so we are talking 1980, 81, 82, somewhere in there, 80, 81, 82. I immediately understood that these were serious games. I didn't think in terms of fun. I didn't ask myself, hey, are these games fun? It's interesting. I knew they were serious games. I knew, and it's funny because Afrika Korps was another one in this period. I thought this was so impenetrably complex. It was awe-inspiring, and yet it's funny because I can look back now and see Afrika Korps and consider, obviously don't have the same perspective today. But my point being that it was understood very quickly to me that war games were something that you basically educated yourself into. And that was something appealing. I'll leave that there, although I think I'll return in different ways in the future. But my point is, I'm not sure there aren't a lot of new young people today who feel the same way. I think maybe we may be painting too broad a brush when we think that new young people to be brought into the hobby have to be given simple, fun, straightforward, immediately accessible. Because that's certainly not what I was given way back when, and it did not. By the way, I should point out, I did not pick up wargaming way back when I'm talking about. I did not. I have to emphasize that. But it's not because of the games. It was because I couldn't find anybody around me to play them after a few times. I got a few people to play, a few of these games, and they all moved on, and I kept my interest. So I felt myself I did give up pursuing the hobby, but I gave up pursuing the hobby because there's nobody around to play with, nobody who was kind of felt that desire to move in. Now, of course, it sounds like I'm contradicting myself when I say there must be people like this in the crop of young people today. I do think I do actually believe that there were people around me who could have been, who I could have gone into the hobby with, but the circumstances were such. 80, 81, 82, Dungeons and Dragons, quite frankly, just took, the young teenage world that I was looking at, took that world by storm. My peers jumped into that. And I was not in a position, and just as important as external factors like Dungeons and Dragons, I have to say I was not in a position, as a young person, I was not in a position to know how to get others around me who I think could have moved into this hobby to go along with me, to put it simply. And I think that there are ways to facilitate young people to do just that, what I was not able to do. So anyways, I knew I was not going to do a good job with that first stab, but I think that's going to come back in the future. And I'm going to take a break right now. Pick this up later.